right, so today we're going to be talking about the DJI Ronin 4D cinema camera combo, the 8K version that just came out. Initially, it was announced about a couple of years ago, the 6K and the 8K, but just now the 8K came out. So I'm not sure why that took some time. Maybe they were trying to get some feedback from the 6K and then improve this one. I'm not sure, but it looks like it's a combo kit that comes with their proprietary lens. That's a 17 to 28 T3.0. And the price is a little steep for those who are independent producers, you know, at over $12,000, nearly $13,000. How do you feel about that?
It's the cost of a small boat. I mean, I don't know.
I could get a really nice BMW convertible that's older, obviously, that for that
used
price.
Car.
But, yeah.
No, I mean, honestly, that's the way things go these days when it comes to cinema type cameras, right? But again, for $12,000, it is a little steep, right? I think we talked about this a couple of years back, right, when we were looking at the 4K and asking about the 6K. You know, is it worth it? It really depends on what you're looking to do. But if you're getting into the cinema camera type world, getting into the 6K is totally fine. Maybe this is a little bit higher, but even this, for what you're getting with the advanced LiDAR that's updated in here, 8K, you know, and a couple of other bells and whistles here, I think it's not bad.
Well, especially when you're comparing to what others are spending on like red cameras, right? Over 20 grand easily for some of the models, you know, for the body only that you still need to rig out, right? And then you're looking at $30,000-$40,000 before you know it. So I think when you compare it to that, it's like, hey, to have an all-in-one like that is kind of worth it. Now, me personally, 6K is more than enough for what I do right now. And even just a couple of years ago, if you remember, I was like, no way, I don't even need a 6K. But now I do like to shoot on 6K because, again, when I'm editing on a 4K timeline, it's nice to have that that option to crop in and not really lose any resolution because you're on a 4K timeline with 6K resolution.
And that is the one, I would say, argument for wanting to go out there and get the 8K version, get the higher end version, right? I think that one of the things we've learned is that there's no such thing as future proofing necessarily anymore. I think that the companies are constantly kind of pushing the limits right now. I think we've got 10K cameras, 12K. There's other stuff that's always going to be out there, but it's again, what are you looking to do with this? And the fact that this has the built-in stabilization with that Z axis as well to be able to help you get additional shots and coverage that you otherwise wouldn't without having to rig it out completely. I think that there's some really cool use cases for it.
And if you're somebody who likes to produce in full HD at 1080p and export at 1080p, which there are still people that do that, which kind of surprises me, to be honest with you. But that will continue to keep doing that for another few years. They don't even need, to jump to 4K in their case. So it's for what you need, right? And what you think you might need in a few years from now, right? Yeah. For some people, they're doing a high level of work, where they might even do CGI or they'll want to crop in quite a lot, and the 8K might really be beneficial to them, especially if they have the budget, And I think with having a more resolution, I believe the pixels are smaller as well, so it hides noise better and some other things. And so I've heard. I could be wrong on that. But
I think it's that old adage of it's nice to have and not need than need and not have.
Exactly.
So I think that there's ways to get around it.
And by the way, this camera actually has a 5.5 inch 1000 nit touchscreen display. Okay. Now, a lot of people seem to be content with that. They're like, oh yeah, it's 1000 nits. That's great. I'm like, me personally, I'll be honest with you. I've been out there in the field with monitors that are around 1000 nits and still felt like I needed to squint sometimes, things like if it's fully bright out, right? So personally, I kind of wish that they had this at 2000 nits and up, maybe even 2500 nits if you're spending that much money, right? I just feel like for a cinema camera that's proper and professional, 1000 nits seems a little subpar. Not terrible, but a little subpar. And maybe even a larger screen would have been nice, maybe at least a 6 inch or 6.5. Personally, I usually buy 7 inch monitors in general. So 7 would have been just lovely.
I think it really comes back down to what you're trying to get into the package without necessarily increasing the weight, way too much or going to that level. So I think that there's always going to be trade-offs. I would love to have 2000 nits as opposed to 1000 in any given situation. Again, back to having it and not needing it, right?
And look, I get cutting corners too sometimes to be able to sell the item at a lower price, But the thing is, if you're looking at, if your audience per se, right, let's say that is professional cinematographers, you have to understand that they are willing to spend a little bit more to get the things that they really need so that they don't have to keep jumping from camera to camera. So personally, if it costs an extra few $100s to get a larger monitor with brightness that's at 2,000 nits, I would love to spend that. What's a couple extra $100 on a $12,000 camera?
I think this comes back down to something that I think would be really interesting to see a company like DJI tackle and do well, because I think Red's done that to an extent as well. Modular construction of these cameras and these combo kits, right? Because there's so many of these interchangeable components. It would be great what if they had a kit where like, hey, I can upgrade just the monitor, right? I do want to get a 7-inch monitor. I do want to get maybe that 5.5 in 2,000 nits. If they were to make it, what would be the business case for it? I think that would be interesting.
And I know you can buy the LiDAR separately, right? And a couple of the other things. So that is to say that they probably could make it where, hey, you can detach the monitor and upgrade the monitor later on. Yeah. And I think that's a good in the middle, decision, Yeah.
So maybe in the future you'll see some of that. I think it really just depends on what they're looking to do.
Yeah, exactly. Now, on the flip side, I will say what's amazing to me is that this system has 9 stops of ND filter, and that's amazing. And, that's a common problem we're seeing with a lot of mirrorless cinema hybrid cameras is they don't oftentimes, if not most of the time, don't have ND filter built in. I understand the body's smaller and this and that, but hey, if it meant making the body slightly bigger and charging you an extra $500 to have ND filters, heck, if you're spending that much anyway on screw-on filters and all this, I would love to, I'll pay the extra money to have that. I think that's great.
Absolutely. And I think it really comes back down to, the additional flexibility that you want to have in your camera, right? It's always nice when you have that built in, right? I remember my very first cinema style camera, I guess you could say, a Canon XL1S had that built-in ND, and it was nice. I was doing weddings back in the day. It was really great to be outside, to shoot a little bit more wide open, doing an outside shot at the botanical gardens or whatever, and then being able to come back inside and having that seamless transition. I think it was great without having to have extra equipment and being able to do more with one piece of equipment as opposed to having 15 or 20. Again, the goal of a camera like this is the fact that you can take a big budget feel or what you would like to have in a big budget and put in a small budget feel, right? At $12,000, $13,000 without having to have all that extra crew. Think about all the extra pieces of equipment you're not having to buy to being able to get the same job done. I think it's great.
No, I agree completely. What's really great about this camera system is that it has a 4th axis. So the system itself at its core is a 3-axis gimbal, like most any gimbal you might buy out there, but it has the extra Z axis, and that's really amazing because you can just hit a button on there if you want to have that on, and now you're eliminating the up and down motion of when you're walking with someone as you're holding the camera and following them. So the fact that this system has this Z axis is huge for me, and if not, maybe even the biggest selling point for me out of everything that this has. And this has a lot of great things about it. So how do you feel about that? Is that something you think you would use?
I think that's one of the things that really makes the 8K even more exciting. Again, when you're talking about being able to crop in, we're talking about in editing and post-production and stabilization. So when you have that extra 4th axis on top of that, so imagine how much type of roughage you could deal with, and being able to edit that kind of stuff out, right? So I think it's fantastic. I think you go back in the day and you look at what you could do with 3 axes alone and what you can do now with 4. I think it just provides you with more options as a filmmaker, and I think that's great.
You just made me realize something. So what's great about having the extra resolution, whether it's 6K or 8K, right? Even though you have this amazing stabilization going on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can bring it in on the timeline. And you can add post stabilization, like say in Final Cut, right? Which usually the way it works is it crops in digitally a little bit, right? But you're still going to have a really crisp, sharp image because you have all that extra resolution that you're bringing in on a 4K timeline, for example. Again, even if it's a 6K or 8K or 12K, if you have a Blackmagic 12K camera, and I have to imagine that that's going to really improve that extra stabilization, if you even need it. This thing's so good already that you may not need to do any post stabilization.
And I think we've all been in a situation where even with the stabilizer, we've had to do some extra work in post, right? Because again, it just depends on the nature of what you're shooting at that time. So imagine you've got 8K, you're all the way out here, and now you have that 4th axis that gives you that additional stabilization. You bring it into post and it's still a little rough in some spots. Well, you can still crop in a little bit and you still have 6K to work with. And then you can crop in even more if you want to make it more more usable or friendly for
Absolutely.
platforms like YouTube.
It's
flexibility and you're allowing yourself, you give yourself way more room to work with.
The other thing that's really amazing is that it has a LiDAR rangefinder. From what I've heard about LiDAR, it's just a different way to process autofocusing, and it's really accurate and really great.
Absolutely. And I think it's only going to get better, but having something like this in there, I mean, and what filmmaker doesn't like, good autofocus, or good focusing in general, to be able to help take one thing out of there. Again, when you're comparing a full-on crew where you have somebody whose sole job is to pull focus, and now you're saying, okay, well, I have to have this guy, and then I have to have a stabilizing, and then I have to have my cinematographer, and then I have to have just somebody else to be able to make sure that I'm getting around my steps correctly. You bring that down with one piece of equipment, you significantly lower the barrier of entry into higher end filmmaking that otherwise you wouldn't have access to for $13,000, right? So I think that's where the trade-off is.
Or again, you go down to 6K, right?
There you
now
go,
you're doing it at, under $7,000. Yeah. And I think it's great, and again, with LiDAR, you should be able to also manually focus as well. And the cool thing about the system is that the grips have control modules on the tip, right? So you can control manual focus as the operator too. You're a 2-in-1 man, or woman, and you're following your talent, and you're just pulling focus. And it's got a rangefinder that pops up on the screen and can show you a graph that makes it very easy to know whether you are within the focus range. So
absolutely,
so many great things about this system, and just really so many great things about this camera as well. And the Zenmuse X9 camera that is now included in this system is one of the best out there. I've seen some tests where they were comparing it to even Sony's, I believe it was FX30 or the FX3, which was just like a beast in low light.
Yeah.
And this thing smoked it.
That's awesome.
And honestly, when this thing came out, the 6K version, I thought, but the camera's probably not going to be that great. Everything else will be great, the stabilization, the LiDAR and everything, but the camera will probably be just adequate, But when I saw this one video that somebody did a test on, I was just like, wow. So it's also a great camera too. And like, this is really a full all-in-one production.
I think that's one of the things that's been really great about DJI as a company, is that when you think about what they have been doing well, especially within the world of the Ronin, right? We're talking about stabilization, where everyone focuses on stabilization. They're stopping and saying, no, hold on a second. We also make very high quality cameras along with this, right? We put this in there. We partner with the right people to be able to get the right type of camera. We know it's not just about stabilization, right? Because like, again, to your point, when you're at a $13,000 price point, why would somebody rather have your product from DJI than going out there and building their own Sony kit or building their own Red kit or doing something else? So it really just makes sense. So the other thing that I think is really cool too with both the 8K and the 6K version is the ability to utilize the hard drive, their proprietary hard drive that clicks right into the unit itself, up to about 1 terabyte, to be able to store internal memory. I think that is fantastic in terms of having that storage. We don't sometimes talk about it as much as we should in terms of storage, but I think it's fantastic. And I think one of the things that kind of threw me off a little bit at first was the price point, right? So you're talking about for a 1 terabyte proprietary hard drive that'll click in about $800. And I was like, that seems kind of steep. But then I remembered my Sony cards, right? And you're looking at something similar, about $800 or so for roughly.
And then you have to transfer the footage, whereas this one, it's a hard drive. You
exactly.
Disconnect it. Yeah.
So I think that's one of those kind of heralded features about the device that a lot of people don't talk about often. But I think it's another one of those things that really makes a big difference at the end.
You know what I heard that was really interesting, at least on the 6K, and I would imagine this is probably the same on the 8K, but apparently if you're shooting to an external SSD on the 6K, it will not shoot in 6K. It'll shoot in 4K. So it's almost like you have to use the proprietary hard drive to get your 6K. I had imagined that it's probably the same thing with the 8K, and maybe there's various reasons for that.
That's probably a good business decision right there.
And you know what? It's not a bad idea to use the proprietary hard drive, because now you're eliminating also the cable between the camera system and the hard drive, which is a potential fail point between the two devices. So I think you just connect this right to the camera, slides right on in, clicks in there, it's secure, and boom, you're ready to go, kind of like a battery almost.
Absolutely. So bringing us back full circle again, we're talking about this amazing new system here in the 8K, and obviously the 6K that's been around and the 4K that's been around since the inception. When you think about all the things that we've talked about today, what is kind of your consensus? What do you think? Where would you go if you had to buy a new system today? Would you go into the 8K, a step down in the 6K? Heck, would you even go out there on the secondary market and try to find a 4K? What do you think?
Well, if budget wasn't a thing, I would say, what? I would just grab the 8K. It's the newest system, it's the latest updates, and all that stuff, and just have it. But today, I would say realistically, I'd be more than content with the 6K and would be able to achieve just some really great feats. So I'd say just 6K for me.
I would say the same thing, and actually, I'll take it a step further too. I would say that if you are on the cusp between the two, wait a couple more months and look to see what the secondary market has to say about the 6K. Because I imagine that there are a lot of guys out there that are thinking to themselves, you know what, I want to upgrade to the 8K, which means they're going to be a lot more on the secondary market in the 6K. You might be able to get yourself a really good deal. So again, if you're not in the cinema camera world, you're working with mirrorless, you're working with DSLR even or something like that you're still trying to get into that next level. I think this is your level up opportunity.
Exactly. Now, I know we're approaching the end of this episode, but I do want to throw this in there real quick. Do you remember the DJI Osmo Pro handheld?
Oh, yes.
Did you? I think you owned one, right?
I had the Osmo. I had the original Osmo version, which I absolutely loved. And then the Osmo Pro came out, and I was super excited. I was wanting to get one of those.
Micro Four Thirds, I think.
Micro Four Thirds camera. Yeah. I had an amazing dream one day of saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to quit my job, get one of these things, and do a travel vlog around the world. Because you could do something like that in such a small form factor. And then in 2018, they discontinued it. End of life.
Well, what I was going to say is if they could come out with a new version of that that has maybe this camera, I would love to have a smaller version of this system at a fraction of the price. Heck, I'd even pay $3,000 for it, for that little thing. If it could, have at the minimum an APS-C sensor, just to have something for when you don't need the entire production version, and you just need something that gets great image, excellent low light, and you can do it with one hand. You don't need anybody holding you, and you don't need a strap or a vest to take the weight off your back. I think that will open up a potential for bringing in some of the others in the industry who don't want to spend over $7,000, over $6,000 for this system.
And funny enough too, when we talked about the Z-axis, that's where the Z-axis came from. It was on the Osmo Pro first.
Really?
It was an additional accessory. Now I'm kind of remembering the memories are flooding back.
It's all coming back.
It's all coming back. But they introduced that first for the Osmo system, right? For the Osmo platform. And they did it exactly for the same reason. We want to get that one axis that we haven't been able to get. So imagining a camera like that in a small form factor, plus all the other things that we're probably not talking about, the ability to program in, different things like time lapses and things like that, automatic panning. You can actually set. I remember with my Osmo, it's one of my favorite things. You can set points and say, I want to start here at this point, here at this point, here at this point. Astrophotography, time lapses, cityscape time lapses, motion-based time lapse. You could do all these different things that I think just add a different layer of filmmaking, in a much smaller form factor. I would love to see that. But I think, again, they decided to go, hey, let's take this to the next level. And that's where the Ronin came in.
I think this is an untapped market. If they were to do this, it would be huge. In fact, I would even purchase both. I would get the new little Osmo Plus Pro Raw, full frame, whatever you want to name it. And I'd even get the 6K, the Ronin 4D. And then depending on what I needed for that day, particular shoot, I would just pick the one that I want, So I think they could definitely make some extra money by just having a smaller version that, maybe doesn't shoot raw, and that's a trade-off, and that's fine. I'd be okay with that. If it's a really good compressed Kodak, I'd be happy with that.
DJI, if you're listening right now, I'm just going to throw this out there. It's the Ronin Mini. You can rebrand it and just make it work, right? It's the Ronin
the
Mini.
Ronin 4D Mini.
There you go.
I think that's great. And if you guys do go through with this, just remember us.
We want our cut.
We want our cut, or you can just throw us a couple of these 8D, AK. I'm okay with that too. And by the way, I have to know, what's in your wish list?
Ooh, I've been adding a couple of things recently, actually. So I'm gonna pull this up right
Give
here.
me your one item for this episode that's on your wish list, and then I'll reciprocate.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned ND filters, right? So I'm going to throw out an ND filter. I bet you didn't think about that. That's the number one thing on my wish list. But it's an NISI Solar Filter Pro, and it's an ND of 100,000.
Huh.
Now, I think you might be wondering, what the heck would you need an ND filter for that much? Well, this April, I'm going to be going to Texas. I'm going to be going right outside of Waco, Texas. Chip and Joanna Gaines, hello. See you guys soon. Because it's the solar eclipse. And in order to see the solar eclipse, you got to have the right type of filter. So I've got this little filter. It's about $100. It's pretty inexpensive.
Okay.
But you put this on your camera and you will actually be able to safely and securely, safely capture that event. So I'm excited for that. I'm going to go all the way down in Texas. I'm going to enjoy myself, see some friends, get some brisket, some nice cold beverages.
Bring me back some of that brisket, man.
Heck yeah, man. I'm excited for it.
It won't be as fresh when you get back, but hey,
it'll still be, still be better than most of the stuff out here. So I'm excited for that. So, and again, if you see anything out there, any cool solar-based filters or other kind of equipment, let me know.
Well, it's funny that your item today on this wish list has to do with ND filter, because so does mine.
No way! Get out of here. Okay, this was not planned.
This was not planned. So it turns out there's this awesome screw-on filter / adapter lens mount. It's called the PhotoDiox X Visualex ND Throttle Fusion Smart AF Cine Edition Lens Adapter for Canon EF.
These
lens.
names are getting ridiculous.
I know. But nobody's worse at it than Blackmagic.
No.
I love you guys, but man, you guys got to start shortening down these model names. But so get this, you can basically get this lens adapter, screw it onto your lens mount on the camera, okay? But this adapter not only lets you now adapt the said lens to it, right? In this case, it's a L mount, so I can connect L mount, lenses to whatever camera, right? But this actual adapter itself has built-in ND filters as well.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's a real thing with full auto abilities for autofocus and setting
That's
your
fantastic.
aperture within the camera. Dude, it's exciting. It's only $4.99 currently at the time of this video. And I think that's so
Not
great.
a sponsor.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wish.
I don't know how many stops of NDs this has, but it is definitely more than enough. And from what I could tell, and it retains its infinity focus as well.
That's
and again, instead of just adapting a lens to a particular camera body, now you can also have the ND. Now you no longer have to screw on an ND filter in front of the lens.
Yeah.
Because what if you have like 3 different lenses and they all have different diameters on the front? Now you have to buy an ND filter for each of those, and you have to buy a good ND filter, because if not, you're going to get that color shift. Now, I don't know what the quality is in the ND filters in this unit, but I'm assuming and hoping, being that much closer to the sensor, that it's just going to be a better type of ND process.
Is super cool. Hey, you learn something new every day.
That's my number one thing on my wish list right now. And actually, I just found out it does control exposure from 2 to 8 stops.
Oh, okay.
So that's quite a bit.
That's
because
a lot.
This DJI is 9 stops.
It's 9 stops, yeah.
So it's just shy of 1 stop there, So
that's fantastic.
Pretty awesome. So that's mine. That's yours. And
all right.
Bring that brisket. And if I pick up one of these, you bring that brisket, I'll let you borrow this.
All right. That sounds like a good trade-off.
Good trade-off. Okay, sounds good.